It's time for boot camp number 2, so let's do this. There's a new challenge on our challenge chart that says use a grid to enlarge an image. That's what we're going to do today. After you've done this boot camp, you can choose that challenge along with blending colors or creating patterns to create your independent projects. To create a grid drawing, you need a grid, and our grids are right down here. Today we're going to be using this size that looks like this. In the future, you might need bigger grids, and they are on the shelves right below where this one is found. Okay, let's see what we're going to do with these grids. For our boot camp, you're going to start by choosing an image, and I have a whole bunch picked out for you that I printed out. There are some logos, there are some cartoons, there are some simple drawings. I kept them all very simple because this is just going to be an exercise boot camp. We're not really making an entire project like the last one. You're going to tape your grid onto the front just with one piece of tape is fine. Try to make sure it covers the whole image. If a little bit sticks out the bottom or the side because it's a little bit bigger, that's totally fine. You also have a paper that looks like this. I know it's hard to see on the video because it's very light, but it has a grid printed on it. And this is 6 across and 6 down, just like this is 6 across and 6 down. What you're going to do is whatever you see in the first square, you're going to draw on the first square on there. Whatever's in the second square, you draw on the second square on here. So this is going to help you to draw this and enlarge it pretty easily. So when I look here, I see that this, if I'm going to draw this top line here, I see that it starts near this top corner. It's kind of, I'm going to say like a quarter of the way down and a quarter of the way over. So I find that spot on here, and I'm going to put a little mark. And then I notice the line when it crosses the edge of this square here is a little above halfway. So I'm going to put a little mark a little above halfway. And then I'm going to go over to the next square, and I see that it comes up just a tiny bit. It's maybe a third of the way down. So I go about a third of the way down here, and I can kind of connect those little dots I've made and start to draw that line. And I'm just going to keep doing that the whole way across. It comes up here near the top, just to the left of that line, and so forth. And I'm just going to keep going like that until I have my picture drawn on here. As I'm working on this, the picture goes down a little bit further than the bottom of my grid. So as I'm working, I just did that. I made that kind of a little extra space, and I did my drawing a little bit below the bottom of my grid. Also notice that this is not a skinny blue line that I'm drawing. It's a fairly thick one. So what I did was I made it kind of like a coloring book page where I drew along the top of the line, and then I drew a second line right along where the bottom would be. So I could color this in if I wanted. And if you want to color your drawing in when you're done, you totally can, but I'm not requiring it for this boot camp. I'll finish with my grid drawing. Remember, you can choose to color it if you'd like to, but you don't have to. Make sure your name and period are on the top, and this gets turned in up in the box. So how can we use this for an independent project? There are lots of ways. One way is you can find a picture either on your Chromebook or in a magazine, and you can take a grid that fits the picture and tape it right to the front. Once you have that done, you just need to get a big piece of paper or whatever size it is you want to use, and a ruler or a yardstick, and measure out every inch or so and create a grid on here. You just need to make sure you have the same number of squares on here as you have taped to the front of your picture, and then you can transfer this to your big piece of paper. Here's an example where I took a picture of myself, taped a grid to the front, and then I actually used a dry erase marker to trace around my face so I could see it easier. I'm going to slide a piece of paper so you can see here between. So see, I traced around my face to make it a simpler picture. And then I used this tracing and I transferred it onto a really big piece of paper. And I have 2 examples for you. They're not quite finished because I didn't paint the background. But here's one example where I used tempera paint and different values, light values and dark values, and painted it. And another example where I used oil pastels. And again, I haven't finished the background yet, but you can get the idea. Okay, so you can do something like that. It doesn't have to be of yourself. It can be something really simple, but that is something you can do. There is also grid paper that is printed out. So another thing you could do instead of drawing your own grid on a big paper is you could use this, transfer it onto here, and then you can use this, like draw it onto here, and then you can use this to transfer it to another piece of paper. Let me show you a magic transfer technique, and then you have the rest of the period to work. All right, magic transfer technique. I'm on the back of my drawing now. Here's my lion that I drew onto my grid paper. I'm going to just color over the back of my drawing wherever I have lines, just kind of scribbling with my pencil. Make sure you have lots of good lead down on there. Then I'm going to take my final paper where I want to make my artwork. I'm going to tape this on the front so it doesn't wiggle around while I'm tracing it, wherever I want this drawing to show up. And then all you do is take your pencil and trace back over your lines on the front here. And And I'm going kind of quickly, but I want to show you that as I'm doing this, it is transferring my design onto the paper here. Hopefully you can see that because I know it's kind of light, but it is making a carbon copy of my drawing right on my final paper. So you can trace the whole thing and you will have your image right on there that you can go on and make your artwork out of. So your two options with a grid are either using the grid paper, drawing it on the grid paper, and then transferring it onto your final copy like this. Or if you don't want to go through this, just take your big piece of illustration board or watercolor paper or drawing paper, draw a grid on it that has the same number of squares, and go ahead and draw right on that for your final copy. Okay, guys, this is a new technique that you have and a new option on the challenge board. Have fun with it and go make something awesome.